What's a way for someone to ruin their lives in 1 minute? Story 1. Excluding accidents and fights, guy got intoxicated at a corporate holiday party and made out at a party consensually with his work wife, who was a one-rank subordinate. HR was unimpressed with the violation of the zero-tolerance policy and fired for cause. Actual wife, unimpressed with excuses, filed for divorce. Work wife/husband is a baffling concept to me. Conceptually, it sounds like foreshadowing for cheating. And in practice, it likely is, but people seemingly casually just joke about having one and have their partners be fine with it. I used to work for a really big accounting firm. Holiday parties were lavish, and someone always did something regrettable and often career-limiting. But a national team-building event in Vero Beach got really out of hand one time. It ended up with a grand piano in the swimming pool and multiple people getting fired. I have a woman a rank below that does most of my admin support. My actual wife has referred to her as my work wife, and I never liked that. I consider myself more as a friend and mentee. I don't think there's anything that could ever get me to cross that line, and I do not understand nor have sympathy for the men who do. And I say men because we all know that the vast majority of the time it's a man with a woman below him in rank. Story 2. She sold pills that she knew contained fentanyl to 2 people. The first one died. She found out and sold the same pills to another person. That person died. Boom, life in prison. The texts between her dealer are what led to her arrest and exposed that she had full and complete knowledge that the pills would result in overdose. Considering going after the guy who sold the crap to a family member myself, I knew they had drug issues, but I also knew exactly what the issues were. Fentanyl and heroin did not make the list. I'll be damned, they found fentanyl and cocaine in their system. I got a hold of their phone after they passed, pretty quickly claiming I was gonna pull photos off. I did. Really wanted the addresses and phone numbers. I got them, screenshotted a bunch of crap and backed it up. I decided against it after looking around on Google Maps and realizing how connected he was. I was pissed but wasn't going to jail for life, or bleeding out in some hood. The highway was too far, plus the entire street was almost definitely affiliated. Dropped a line to the anonymous tip line from a buddy phone, and moved on. Streets will get them eventually anyway. He'd been shot a lot before and shot it recently based on the texts I read, so someone didn't like me. For people who end up in a similar spot, let me go and drop a line to the police. I've been there and I understand the thought process. Think about your life and the life of your family afterward. It's just enough to push you to not. If it's not, wait a week, and if it's still not, maybe it's worth it to you, but understand your life is over the moment you make a plan and act. Story 3. When I was in my early 20s, I worked as an energy worker in a field service. One of my really close friends was someone who I was on calls with regularly. A project lead pressured both of us to work on equipment we weren't qualified or trained to work on, and we unfortunately relented. We were halfway done with the task, and I walked to the truck to grab water bottles. Halfway to the truck, I hear a giant buzz and then a huge bang and then screaming. By the time I get back to the generator room, he's fully on fire. The cabinet had arc blasted and he had been right in the way. By the time I got our fire blanket from the truck, he was basically engulfed. I was able to put him out and get him into as much of a recovery position as I could, and then I called our shop to get them to organize rescue to our location. He somehow survived 80 to 90% second and third degree burns, but coded so many times he ended up with severe brain damage from oxygen deprivation. He lost his eyes, his sense of smell and taste, and much of his sense of touch. I think he lost his hearing from the noise of it too. He's in a vegetative state in a full-time care facility now. I had frequent nightmares for years about it. The thing that stuck with me the most was, since the arc blast had hit him basically right in the face, it basically boiled his skin off. I ran in and saw him ripping large pieces of his face off while he tried to bat the flames away. The smell and sight of that never goes away. This is remarkably similar to the reason I started smoking. I was 19 or 20, my third day on the job as an electrician's apprentice. We got sent to some warehouse that was being rented by some sketchy reshipping company. The boss demanded that we work everything hot so he could have the workers working while we hung lights and a scissor lift above them. While we were hanging lights, an old-timer named Jim was adding a couple of breakers into the panel for circuits that we would run later. The whole op was sketchy as hell, but the owner paid us each an extra $150 to work it hot, and my journeyman was a crackhead, so I didn't have a choice. At 11:30 exactly, my journeyman and I heard a loud boom from the area Jim was in. We jumped up out of the lift and rushed over to him. He had arced out the panel. We later found out that he had dropped an insulated screwdriver between the posts and wasn't wearing an ounce of PPE. He was basically a mass of scorched flesh and a pair of Red Wing boots. There was no doubt that he was DOA. The rest of the day for me was my journeyman and department manager funneling me cigarettes to calm me down. It got so bad that I needed a cigarette before I started any work for a month. It was one of the only ways I could get that smell out of my nose. Eventually, the cigs just became a habit and I became numb to the experience. I never confronted it, but I ended up writing a paper in college about it. That was the first time I talked about it with anyone, and I've started to get over it since then. At least enough to talk about it. I was taught as an electrical worker never to work on things live if possible, especially on high voltage and amps. I have met a lot of bosses that would want us to work things hot. When we do work things hot, we have to not allow to work alone, and work in pairs, and have safety equipment for the job. Always carry insulated tools when working with electricity. Wear electric-proof boots and wear no metal on you. Wear cotton clothes always to avoid burns from clothes burning if caught on fire. If you are not trained for the job, please do not do it, especially electric jobs. Even if you are trained, make sure to take all precautions. I have lost way too many coworkers because of idiotic thinking or avoiding safety for speed and comfort. I have quit jobs because of safety issues, and many team leaders wanting to push us to do unsafe things. I have a story that fits here as well, though slightly less in that it was unfortunately the victim's doing entirely. April 2020. Every small-scale pharmaceutical manufacturer is making hand sanitizer to capitalize on the pandemic shortage. There are 3 of these in my area, and every single one has pivoted their operations to making hand sanitizer. A former coworker is a maintenance man at one of these manufacturers. He had to work on the motor of one of the tanks. He decided to do so after nearly everyone had gone home. Only the main boss was still there, and he was up in the front of the building. It's unclear if he knew he was still there working on equipment. It was a tank full of some 1,000 gallons of hand sanitizer, a product that is 70% alcohol. He was using a drill and it sparked. 3rd-degree burns on every part of him except his feet. Boss found him when he was leaving and was doing a building check and saw the lights were still on. He did not survive. The cautionary part of this tale is that people are so accustomed to hand sanitizer they tend to forget that it's flammable. While you probably will never find yourself leaning over 1,000 gallons of it, just bear in mind to be careful with it all the same. Don't use it near open flames or things that could spark. I saw a truck driver in our shop get crushed from about the top of his stomach to just below his knees. 2 Sager cans, steel tubes used to bake carbon electrodes. Combined weight of both around 1,800 pounds. We were loading them on his trailer, bound for Canada, and he climbed a ladder to untwist his strap and got off balance, grabbed the inside edge of the can, and it became unbalanced on the dunnage. It hit the ladder on which he was standing, about 10 feet up, which knocked him off, and the cans fell on him. I knew by the sound something wasn't right, and before I laid eyes on him, his wife screamed the most terrifying scream I've heard to date. We got the can picked up enough for her to drag him out, and he didn't even look like he was in pain, but he was in shock. The fire department got there first, and the paramedics said the guy wouldn't live long enough to fly to Nashville, about a 15-minute helicopter ride from the scene. He didn't speak English, but French, but his wife spoke some English. He survived the flight. They operated on his crushed pelvis, took a lot of his intestines out and spleen, and repaired the arteries in his abdomen. 3 days later, had surgery to repair his mangled legs. He died the day after that of a blood clot. I was about 23 years old then, and I still work at the shop it happened in, but I think about that every day of my life. My college buddy died in a workplace accident. I had gone through and done a Wi-Fi coverage proposal with APs for maximum coverage at a school. He was the wireman and he got stuck with running the cable. The one day I was not there due to COVID, he ran a cable to a challenging AP point which included routing around a large circulating fan. He did not do lockout-tagout on the device as he was the only one in the building and it was supposed to be closed, and he would only be in a danger state for a few minutes. A new teacher had arrived that day and wandered into the building, grabbed a bank of switches and turned them on for light. One of those included the fan, which energized and knocked him 4 stories down onto his back. He died from the resulting infection after being partially paralyzed. I'm still traumatized about it because I'm the one who proposed all of it, and I'm slavish as hell to workplace protocols. I would have told him to get the hell down and kill Power at the breaker in a second if I had seen that. I can't imagine what that teacher went through because he fell in front of her. Story 4. Cousin dove into the shallow end of the pool while drinking, paralyzed, and life was never the same. I never believed this was a thing as a kid despite all the warnings. Then as an adult, I threw a hotel and drunkenly dove into the pool, scraped all the way from my chin to the bottom of my feet. I was only worried about how hot I would look coming out of the pool and not the depth. So effing stupid, and I suddenly understood how easy it would be to ruin my life. I had a near miss last summer cliff diving. 80-foot jump where you need to clear about 8 feet horizontally or you'll hit the cliff before you hit the water. It took me a bit to work up the nerve to jump, and as soon as I did, I looked down and was certain that I had not cleared the rocks and was about to shatter every bone in my body as I dragged my ass along the rocks 50 feet down from the top. I hit the water maybe 18 inches out from the edge of the cliff. I was leaning forward and looking down, which is not the correct entry position, so it hurt. But it scared me enough that I told my girlfriend to never let me walk up to that cliff again. If I go up, I'll jump, and the risk isn't worth it. There is another cliff at the same lake that is much safer. The rocks at the top actually overhang, so you can jump straight off without any horizontal leap. I live within reasonable driving distance of a lake. It's one of my favorite places to take photos because the pier is curved and looks amazing. Halfway down the pier, there's a mini headstone zip-tied to the rail, with a memorial and a warning about a man who dived off the pier and onto a sandbar. Every now and again, his friends and family zip-tie beer bottles and flowers and stuff to the memorial. It's definitely a sobering reminder to test the waters before diving, and to preferably not dive at all. A childhood friend of mine did the same thing, jumping off of a raft into the lake. Thank God his friends recognized something was wrong and pulled him to the shore before he drowned. He had emergency surgery and was told he'd absolutely never walk again, but might regain some gross motor movement in his arms. His mom then refused the diagnosis and had him transferred to a different hospital, where he had another surgery that he was told would give him a chance to walk again. It's been over 4 years since then, and he has some serious mobility issues. With that said, he can walk without assistance. I think he just needs support to keep his foot flat, and he sometimes uses a cane. He regained movement in his arms, and best of all, he's playing the freaking drums professionally. Dude's a quadriplegic who plays the instrument that requires full-body coordination. He got engaged a little while ago too. He's gotten really into cooking and also has the highest rating for wine tasting. I don't know what it's called, but I know it's hard to get, and works part-time teaching people about wine and holding tastings. I don't keep up with him much anymore, but I've been following his journey on social media. His mother initially reached out to me to tell me what had happened after the accident, and it literally made me feel sick. I couldn't imagine what was going through his head, while he was stuck in his own body facing the prognosis of lifelong paralysis. It's dark and morbid to say, but I thought his life was effectively over. He clearly knew better than that, though, because he worked his ass off to recover to the fullest extent possible and build a really sweet life. ETA. I was excited to share my friend's story, but I didn't think about how it would come across in response to your comment. I'm sorry your cousin wasn't able to make the same recovery, and I'm not implying that hard work alone can cure paralysis. In my friend's case, it was certainly a combination of hard work, being able to see the right doctors in the right time frame, and luck that he didn't totally sever his spinal cord when he broke his neck. From what I understand, the swelling around the spinal cord was the largest concern, other than the acute injury, and had he not had that second surgery, nerve compression from the swelling would have made his recovery truly impossible. Story 5. An ex-girlfriend of mine, a lovely person, was out at a restaurant or bar with a friend one night. They had a meal and played pool. When they left, for some reason she drove his car. I don't know why, but I know that when she and I were together, she asked to drive my car just for the experience of driving a different car. Maybe that was it. And I imagine driving in someone else's car, you take a few extra seconds to adjust the seat and the mirrors and get your bearings. Unbeknownst to her, a teenager was driving a Mustang nearby. He was pissed because someone passed him a mile earlier and his ego was hurt. He decided to catch up to the guy and floored the Mustang, getting up to speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. As my ex pulled out of the parking lot to cross the median, she had no way of seeing the Mustang barreling toward her over a hill. He crashed into her, killing her and her passenger. 2 seconds earlier or later, and they would not have made contact. I went to his trial. I remember her poor mother sitting there stone-faced while testimony was given. Several lives were ruined at that moment. My ex was only 26. She never got married, never had kids, never found her way in life. Reminds me, I once was driving back to my hotel after work while I was on travel. I timed the light and blew through it as soon as it turned green. Not normally something I do, but we were working late and I wanted to get back and go to bed. In my rear-view mirror, I saw a car blast by inches behind my bumper. Would have impacted me directly on the driver's side if I had waited slightly. These days, I wait a second and visually clear the intersection both ways. But sometimes there's just not enough visibility to be sure. Like you said, sometimes it's just luck one way or the other. A nurse who didn't know how to drive at night plowed her van into my daddy when he was 26. He was just sitting in the front passenger seat with his seatbelt on. She T-boned not just the car he was in, but he himself. He was the only one hurt or killed, and she messed him up so bad he had to be cremated. Alas, no trial for the little nursery, and no attempt to even apologize to his only child, who was 5 years old and asleep at the time she killed him. That was almost 4 decades ago, and I've been an insomniac ever since. Sometimes I can get a little sleep during the day. I'm glad the guy went to jail. My mother-in-law died a few days after the same thing happened to her. The guy was 18 or a month short of it. Per his car computer, he was speeding up, and that matched the car that blocked her view. Was going over 80 when he hit her driver's side in a 45 zone. The DA did not prosecute because he was a young kid with his life ahead of him, and she was in her 70s. That was not a fun email to read. Insurance sued for medical costs for ICU, etc. on our side. My father-in-law was broken when the law did not want to pursue it. He signed away his right to sue to get insurance money, and then the family of the kid tried to sue for the value of their car. They lost, but it was like a spit in the eye. Story 6. He was excited to see a band. He decided to slide down the escalator wall between the up and down as he went to the subway. Tripped, fell 2 stories, and that was the end. In a mildly similar thing, also a horrified witness. College frat party, very chill vibe, not a rager. A mildly drunk kid mid-conversation decides to hop up and have a seat on the railing of a deck that we were out on. He hopped up and did one of those panicked flails that you do when your chair is about to tip backward, and fell backward off the deck. Lands on his head. Med-evac'd to the nearest trauma center. Did not make it through the night. I didn't know him, just saw him around campus. What was really sad to see was most people assumed he was a drunk idiot at a raging frat party and wound up doing some dumb stunt. He really just made a minor drunken mistake or miscalculation and paid for it with his life. I knew someone who got stupid-faced drunk. Big dude, passed out. Friends helped him get back to his dorm room. They found him dead in the morning, choking on his own vomit. Brutal, man. I had a friend who was in a pretty bad place at the beginning of college. Lost a parent the year before. We all went out drinking one night. He usually hits it really hard. He crashed into our room on the floor. They used to make fun of me because I'm a notoriously light sleeper. Middle of the night, I hear this really weird noise that I can't place. I'm laying there for a minute in the dark trying to figure out what it is. I rolled over and flashed my phone light and saw my friend flat on his back actively aspirating on his vomit. We turned him over and it was okay, but he woke up the next morning and asked why his pillow was in the sink, covered in vomit. Had no idea what happened. He was pretty shaken up by it. I think it actually helped him clean up his act a little. Story 7. When I was a teenager, my dad and this dude had beef with each other. My dad was dating this guy's ex-wife, and he didn't like that. They bumped into each other at the bar and exchanged some words. My dad left the bar, and the dude was waiting for him outside. A car rolled up, and somebody handed the dude a handgun. He pointed at his head from about 2 feet away and pulled the trigger. Luckily for my father, the gun jammed. My pops wasn't taking any chances, so he took off running. The dude cleared the gun and emptied the clip, missing all but one shot that hit my dad in the back. My dad was already downtown, and the hospital was only a couple of blocks away. Or so he thought. Unluckily for my padre, the hospital was under renovation and preparing for relocation. When he saw that it was under construction, he slumped over and called 911 for an ambulance. The surgeons removed his kidney because it was too damaged for repair, and survived. The dude got an attempted murder charge and almost 15 years in prison. Story 8. I had a friend who got in his car, drunk with 5 other people. Flipped the car and killed one of the passengers. He went from being this charming, good-looking, likable guy to a shut-in and was seen as a monster by a lot of people in the community. He ended up committing suicide about a year after that incident. He was seriously broken about what had happened. I've done background checks as part of my job, and it's honestly surprising how many people have DUIs. We really don't take them seriously enough as a country, considering how dangerous they are. It's terrible when people are ostracized, but the other end looks even worse. I went to high school with a girl who strayed into oncoming traffic after a party. She killed the other girl in the car with her and broke her leg. Everyone acted like she was some sort of returning hero who had just been in a random accident, and it was just so sad her friend had died. Like no one was at fault. Ireland used to be a drink-drive country with a rural population, the only way to socialize and get home in the 80s and 90s. Deaths were out of control, so in fairness, the government clamped down with huge advertising campaigns and heavy sentences with increasingly low limit thresholds. It's incredibly frowned upon now, and people often lose their license for years, and often their jobs. When I lived in America, it was like time traveling. One guy told me he had multiple DUIs previously and was back driving again. Yeah, that's hard to live with a mistake that big. My friend was driving drunk and probably not for the first time. Got pulled over, got a DUI, and did the court-ordered education. After that, he got divorced, moved closer to the bar, sold his truck, and walked everywhere from then on in penance. He died last year of natural causes, no vehicle, and he hurt no one, but the shame was writ large when he talked about it once. I'm amazed at how normalized driving drunk is in America, like people only have a bad reaction to it when someone gets in an accident while DUI. People who have been lucky enough not to cause accidents freely admit to it and think it's no big deal. Where I'm from, it's extremely frowned upon. No one in their right mind would willingly admit to ever driving drunk, as people will, rightfully so, judge them extremely harshly for it. Story 9. A kid I went to high school with wasn't going to graduate and decided to protest by speeding and doing wheelies on the road in front of the school. On his 3rd round, he passed a pickup truck, hooked his legs on the bumper, and is thrown from the bike right on his head, snapping his neck. School posthumously graduated him. Edited to help clear up questions. Happened in 1995 in the northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin border. I noticed his intelligence had been questioned. Let me share an additional anecdote. His nickname was Bob. When asked what it was backwards, he replied without guile or irony that it was oob. Whether you agree with the school's action in graduating him or not, locally it was considered window dressing as the whole town knew of what had happened within hours of his accident. I graduated from high school and there were only like 175 kids in my class, so it was a small town where everyone knew everyone. My friend in 3rd grade was diagnosed with brain cancer and had surgeries and treatment and ended up going into remission. Fast forward to our freshman year, it came back, and he was dead within 2 months. When we graduated, the school said that he was going to get a chair that would have a banner and a cap and gown on it so that he could graduate with us, which made local news that sent people to film it as well as his family to see him be honored. The school realized a few days before that, someone who wasn't supposed to be walking was actually able to, and they gave her his cap and gown and chair. Adding another chair would have made another row, so they didn't change their minds, and this girl got so much hate. Story 10. A guy I went to high school with was kicked out of his college ROTC and moved back home. After some time of living at home, his dad walked into his bedroom and went off about him being a lazy ass and needed to do something with his life. He decided he was going to take his gun and rob a bank. Supposedly the gun wasn't loaded, but he did successfully rob the bank and get away. Some time went by. He moved out of his parents' house and started living it up. He eventually told someone that he trusted. That person turned him in. He was arrested and charged. He got a count for every person who was in the bank because he had a gun. You can decide if he ruined his life when he decided to rob a bank or when he decided to tell someone that he did it. As an avid gun enthusiast and the brother to someone that was robbed at gunpoint in a bank, F this guy. Doesn't matter if it was loaded. Doesn't matter if he intended to harm anyone. The only reason it worked was because those tellers and innocent bystanders believed 100% that non-compliance would end in their death. To this date, my siblings can't go into a bank, can't look at a gun, and struggle around tall black men. Story 11. The man who killed my grandfather had never so much as had a speeding ticket. He was married with kids and fell behind on rent. My grandfather that was in his 80s worked for the company that rented this guy his home for extra money. Grandpa couldn't reach him about his rent, so went and did a welfare check. The guy panicked and murdered my grandfather, destroyed more than one life in a matter of 30 seconds. I never met my grandfather on my mother's side. His great-uncle, who was in his 70s, had eloped with some young 20-something trophy wife. Well, she and my granddad thought it would be a good idea to sneak off together for a weekend. When he took her home, I don't know if it was planned, or if he just got bored or tired of her, his great-uncle came out on the porch with a .22 LR and put a round between his eyes. I'm so sorry about your grandfather. Very similar situation in my family. My sister was killed by a drunk driver who never even got a slap on the wrist. He had stopped at a local bar, very small town, only 2 bars, on the way back to pick up his epilepsy meds and got loaded. On the way to the drugstore, while completely drunk, he had a seizure and killed my sister, and did his darndest to kill the other 2 girls in the car, years of recovery for them. There was an inquest, and the magistrate said that he had suffered enough as his wife had passed away 6 months earlier, and he was still grieving. It destroyed my family, especially my father, who was never the same after that. Sucks. Some people have a disconnect when they panic. A former coworker tells a story about finding a snake in her house once. It happens here, no big deal, except that we're in an area with multiple species of deadly snakes. She panics, grabs this snake that she has no idea whether it's venomous or not, with her bare hands, runs outside with it, and runs around in her yard still holding the snake, trying to decide where to put it. Luckily, it apparently turned out to be non-venomous. Story 12. The pretty successful woman at a company I worked for got drunk and took an Uber home from a party. Realized she left the keys to her apartment behind, so she decided to climb up to her second-story balcony to get her spare set. She slipped, paralyzed herself, couldn't work for a year, racked up ridiculous medical debt, and the pandemic left her position useless, so she was let go. Oh man, something similar happened to my neighbor in high school. We lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building, and she had been drinking at a party and forgot her keys. Decided to try and climb from the stairwell across to her balcony to try to sneak in, and fell. She broke her arms and wrists and legs, and messed something up in her back, I think. I remember her mom knocking on our door the next morning to ask if we'd heard any of it. She spent her junior year in a wheelchair, but she was pretty lucky, and I think she healed up okay. Story 13. My former roommate had a great job, made great money, and had his own house in which I rented a room. The only problem was, he was a serious alcoholic and a crappy person. He'd get up at 4:30 to go to work, get off at 2, and then hit the bar until 11. Every single night. Unless he had a girl coming over, then he'd go home at 10, do a quick cleanup of his filthy room, and have obnoxious and very inconsiderate loud sex. He hit a guy who was riding his bike drunk driving his way home one night, fled the scene, came home, and went to the neighbor's house and said he hit a pole. The neighbor called the police, and on the way to the house, they found the guy he hit with his front bumper next to the body. He went to jail for vehicular homicide, did 6 months and got out. Now he lives with his parents and can't get a job because his story is a little infamous in our town. His sister took over his mortgage and lives in his house now. All he does all day is cry on Facebook about how life isn't fair and badmouth the guy he killed. Story 14. Security company. This happened before I worked there, but some coworkers told me the story. Guy was doing well at his job, got lots of promotions on his way to lieutenant, but was too into his job and got a police scanner that he would listen to. One day, just as he was getting off of work, a high-speed chase went by. He hopped in his personal vehicle with his firearm, got to the front of the chase, blocked the suspect in, and pulled his gun. Suddenly, the cops were much more interested in the crazy guy with a gun. Got hit with several felony charges. Story 15. Some guy tried to come into my nightclub when he was clearly too drunk. I made the call to not let him in, so he started shouting at me and tried to aggressively walk up to me. I put my hands up in defense and he's pushing back against me. Then the dude lunged at my boss next to me, so my boss shoves him. The guy tumbled backward and slammed the back of his head on the curb. Paralyzed from the neck down forever. Tried to take my boss to court for $15 million, but the camera showed this guy instigating everything. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.